Osbert Woods, UN Country Coordinator, invited participants, those joining us online via Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom, good morning. A warm welcome to those joining us for the first time today, and a warm welcome back to those who had returned from Nevis. We had a very successful launch yesterday, and we look forward to a very productive day. Sorry about that. Most citizens in this our beautiful federation are quite familiar with water load shedding. In St. Kitts in particular, we are no strangers to the nightly shutoffs of water at 10 p.m., and in some cases, even earlier than that. The dwindling water supply affects every sector, as water is vital to our existence. Our changing climate has frustrated our farmers, especially those dependent on rainfall. The low yields and heat-stressed livestock have led to higher prices in the market and road stands. Our high importation of food compromises our ability to be food secure and create a different type of vulnerability. This was never more clear than in the first months of COVID, when the usual food containers from North America did not arrive on time. And of course, we are only too familiar with the increasing advent of monster storms, particularly during the Atlantic hurricane season. With a collective land mass of less than 110 square miles, these systems can cause havoc across the entirety of our small island state by threatening lives, livelihoods, structural integrity, and our very ability to survive. If each vulnerability is taken and handled separately, we would stand a better chance of having tolerable lives. However, the cumulative effect of these various events weakens our systems, where each day we tread the fine line of total system failure. It is quite possible in the near future that we can face a year where there is a bad outbreak of Zika, chikungunya, or dengue, followed by a devastating drought leading to crop failure, followed by a hit from a Category 5 hurricane. Colleagues, if you think about this seriously, this scenario is highly probable. A year like that could completely devastate our people and our economy. One additional vulnerability, or maybe more of a challenge, is our ability to readily access external financing to implement the programs and projects that will build our resilience and cushion us from a total system failure. Our ineligibility to receive overseas development assistance funds has seriously impacted and hampered our ability to build resilience. I therefore encourage all our partners to assist us in identifying all the financing options that we are eligible for. I know that the forecast I have painted is a very gloomy one, but in spite of the various threats, I need to remind you that all is not lost. And that is one of the reasons why we have gathered here today, to work on building our response mechanism to these clear and present dangers and to bolster our resilience to same. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, I want to once again thank all our partners who have joined us today to lend support to this exercise. And I want to single out the NDC Partnership Support Unit, IRENA, and Climate Analytics for their generous support in handling to craft the NDC implementation plan that forms the basis of our work. I look forward to the presentations and discussions that will unfold this morning. Once again, I wish you all a hearty welcome and a successful day's proceedings. Thank you.
Hello. This mic is, hello, all right. Good. Yes.
Thank you. We now go around the room. For everyone to briefly introduce themselves, which organization you represent, and your role in St. Kitts and Nevis. So your name, your organization, and your position. Let's say that. Okay, we'll start in the room. We'll start with.
Good morning. I'm Kashi Fines, Conservation Officer, Department of Environment.
Morning, Cheslin Morris, Economist, Ministry of Sustainable Development.
Good morning, Kathleen Buchanan, Assistant Natural Ozone Officer, Department of Environment.
Manners, Senior Project Analyst, Department of Economic Affairs and PSIP.
Good morning, everyone. Dinasio Frank, Energy Officer in the Energy Unit, the Ministry of Public Infrastructure.
Good morning, Bertil Brown, Director of the Energy Unit, the Ministry of Public Infrastructure.
Good morning, Thelma Richard, Economic Affairs and PSIP.
Good morning, Yashena Jeffords, Agronomist at the Department of Agriculture.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Cosbert Woods, United Nations Country Coordination Officer for St. Kitts and Nevis within the UN Resident Coordination Office for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean.
Good morning, Floyd Robinson, Integrated Water Resource Management. I'm the Director from Nevis.
Good morning, I'm Dr. Hala Saheli. I'm currently the IWECO Project Coordinator and the National Consultant for the Technology Needs Assessment for Adaptation.
Good morning, everyone. Lynelle Bonaparte, Conservation Officer at the Department of Environment.
Good morning, everyone. Berta Shiverton, Systems Coordinator, Department of Technology.
Good morning, everyone. Kay Stanley Frederick, Assistant Secretary, Ministry of Communications and Entrepreneurship.
Good morning, everyone. Leah Craig Chatterton, Assistant Secretary, Ministry of Entrepreneurship, Entertainment and Talent Development.
Good morning, everyone. Ulrika Lennon-Petty, Planning Officer, NEMA.
Good morning, everyone. Wendy Williams, National Consultant on the IECA CARICOM Ag-Ready Project.
Good morning, all. Lawrence Knight from CADI, and CADI's goal is to facilitate food security through technology research.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikita Brown, and I am a project coordinator at the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN for short. I am working along with the Ministry of Sustainable Development to implement the GEF6 project, improving environmental management through sustainable land management in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Good morning, everyone. Vistia Woods. I'm the Biosafety Officer in the Department of Environment.
Morning, Darren Edmead, Environmental Education Officer, Department of Environment.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kezia Daniel. I'm the project assistant in the Department of Environment.
I now turn to, who have I forgotten? Oh, Mrs. Phipps.
Good morning, Jessica Ferdinand Phipps. I'm a local consultant, GCF Readiness Project, being done with the Ministry of Sustainable Development on building capacity and country programming.
Okay, thanks. I'll now turn to Rallying to organize the introductions on the virtual platform.
Thank you, everyone. We're now going to try to have people online introduce themselves, because we have 40 people on the line, 44 actually, and we want to make sure that you're also really part of the meeting today. So we're just going to go by organization. Let's start with Michelle Frojmovic from Acacia Consulting. We can also go to the next, which is the CDB. Leighton Waterman, please unmute yourself to briefly introduce your team on the line.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Leighton Waterman, Caribbean Development Bank Sustainable Energy Specialist in the Sustainable Energy Unit. My other colleague, Derek Gibbs, hasn't joined me as yet from our Environmental Sustainability Unit. We've been working via her part of the NDC Partnership, as you know, for the region. So we're looking forward to discussions today and how we can continue to assist St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Next we have 5C, Keith Nichols.
Good morning, Keith Nichols from 5Cs. I'm the head of the Program Development Management Unit. And 5C supports the work of St. Kitts and Nevis through a variety of portals, including implementing the readiness projects supported by the GCF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Gary Jackson from CCREEE to introduce the team.
Hello, good morning. My name is Gary Jackson. I'm the Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Currently, we are working with the St. Kitts and Nevis electricity companies, SKN and Nevlec, to develop an integrated resource and resilience plan that will take into consideration new generating assets that are sustainable energy, demand forecasting, transmission and distribution that will make the country more efficient and resilient. We have a few team members online. We should have Jean-Michel Parle, Gerald Lindo, and Algon Meeple. Three of the members, I think, are online, and others may be online. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Climate Analytics, Fran Fuller.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you all in the room and in the chat. I'm Fran Fuller, the Director of Climate Analytics New York office. Also on the line with me is Dr. Jan Sint, who is the head of our implementation strategies team. We had the pleasure of working with St. Kitts and Nevis through the revision of the NDC and associated deliverables through the NDC Partnership. We're also going to be working on a project with other regional organizations, including CCRE, 5Cs, CDB, and others on a regional project that starts this year, running for 5 years, that's focusing on e-mobility. And we look forward to seeing where we can work with St. Kitts and Nevis going forward to support the implementation of the NDC and the priorities outlined in the NDC implementation plan. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Next we have the ECCB, Kiran Sindh Omar.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kiran Sindh Omar. I am the Senior Projects Officer in the Governor's Immediate Office, with responsibility for the Eastern Caribbean Regional Renewable Energy Infrastructure Investment Facility. It will just be me today from the bank. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next we have the EU, Donna Gittins.
Hi, good morning everyone. Donna Gittins, Program Manager for Climate Action at the delegation in Barbados. We currently support the kids through budget support and under a number of regional programs aimed at improving climate resilience and addressing the nexus between climate change and health. Looking forward to see how the organization can support the actions that come out under the NDC. And two other colleagues are likely to join me, but they haven't joined quite as yet.
Great, thank you for joining. Next we should have FAO, Jacinto Buenville.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jacinto Buenville. I'm a Policy Officer for Environment and Climate Change at FAO. We're working in St. Kitts and Nevis in a Resilient Caribbean Initiative project, basically in aquaculture and water energy for nexus. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have the GHGMI, Ryan Deosaran.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Deosaran. I'm a Program Manager at the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute and the Caribbean Cooperative MRV Hub. Joining us on the team today would be Mr. Mate Gasparic, a Senior Manager at GHGMI, and Ms. Benice Joseph, a Program Associate at GHGMI. At present, we're currently working on different elements of the NC3 and PUR, so MRV components, constraints, and gaps, as well as the inventory. We're all looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Irina Paula Nardone.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Paula Nardone. I'm part of the Climate Technology and Infrastructure team at IRENA. We had the big pleasure of supporting the St. Kitts and Nevis Revision and Enhancement NDC on focusing on the mitigation component. And we are here today happily looking forward to the discussions on how we can support further in the implementation phase of the NDC. Thank you very much.
OECS representative, please. Chana Emmanuel.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Shana Emmanuel here from the OECS. My colleague Crispin Dovan is also on the call this morning, and we work with St. Kitts and Nevis on several initiatives, and of course are looking forward to being part of the team that helps them to implement this NDC. Thanks.
Thank you. Next we go to RMI, Caitlin Bunker.
Good morning, everyone. My colleague Caitlin Bunker isn't on the call today, but I'm Sydney Jules, a manager at Rocky Mountain Institute's Island Energy Program. We've been supporting various NDC Partnership initiatives around the Caribbean. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we're currently working with SECRE, the utilities, and the energy units on the generation and transmission expansion planning portion of the Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Then we have the TNC, Nila Frederick.
Hi, good morning. I'm Orlando Harvey here. Niala who is our climate specialist, would join us a little bit later, but I'm Orlando Harvey. I'm the Marine and Coastal Projects Manager with the Eastern Caribbean Office of the Nature Conservancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we turn to the UN. I think Bianca Young is here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bianca Young. I'm the National Environmental Analyst from UNEP's office in the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office. I'm joined this morning by Sarah Fitzgerald. She is a Project Support Officer. And I believe we should be joined by the head of our office, head of the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office, Vincent Sweeney, at some point today. And we look forward to supporting St. Kitts and Nevis in its NDC initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much for introducing UNEP. And then we go to UNDP, Enlyn McPhee.
Hi, good morning. My name is Danielle Evanson from UNDP. My colleagues, Enlyn McPhee from HQ in New York, supports the Climate Promise Initiative and the NDCs, as well as Mohammed Nagdi, the head of cluster for environment at the Barbados and the OECS office. They should be joining us at some point later, but they're not quite online yet. But thank you for having us.
Thank you, Danielle. We're trying to track here. We now turn to UNFCCC, Carol Ann Blenman.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Carol Ann Blenman, and I'm the Climate Finance Officer for the UNFCCC Windrift Regional Collaboration Center in St. George's, Grenada. Other colleagues on the call include Mr. Carlos Ruiz-Garbia, the Regional Lead for RCC St. George's, Mr. Randy Wechter, a Global Steering Committee member and also a staff member of Windrift, as well as Mr. Ventura Silva from UNFCCC headquarters in Bonn, and Ama Botang, the research officer for RCC St. George's. And we're happy to be on the call, and we look forward to fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have UNICEF, Michael Ashorn.
Hi, good morning. My name is Michael Ashorn, and I'm the Climate, Environment, and Disaster Risk Reduction Officer at UNICEF Eastern Caribbean. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here yesterday, but happy to be here today. UNICEF is really looking forward if we can support St. Kitts and Nevis in the meaningful engagement of youth in the implementation of NDCs. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And then we should have Sierra Saylor from the US. Let's see if you're on the line and want to introduce yourself. Otherwise, I think we can just finally also let some more governments colleagues introduce themselves that have joined us. So let's see, we should have Floyd Robinson. Oh. Great. Jamela Davis. Ron Dublin Collins. Tanya Bartlett, Earl Springett, Jervin Swanston, Jonathan Kelly, Lethan Narain, and Carlene Henry Morton. Well, hopefully that gives you an idea who is not in the room, but who is also joining us online. Anyone else? We're now going to move on to the next agenda item, so feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself as we go.
Good morning. Naranda Maurice George, Green Climate Fund Regional Consultant to the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naranda. Okay, colleagues. That is the first item on the agenda for this morning is an overview of what we did yesterday and outcomes of the launch. I'll now call on Cheryl Jeffers and Narissa Williams to present on these items. A pleasant good morning, all. During the introductions, we did not introduce ourselves because we know we were next on the agenda, but just to reiterate, my name is Cheryl Jeffers, Conservation Officer within the Department of Environment and one of the two NDC Partnership focal points assigned to St. Kitts and Nevis. Narissa?
Narissa Williams, Project Analyst within the Department of Economic Affairs and Public Sector Investment Planning, Ministry of Sustainable Development, co-focal point, NDC Partnership.
Okay, thanks. So yesterday we had the high-level ministerial launch, which commenced about 9:15 with Ms. June Hughes, acting PS, as moderator, who delivered her opening remarks. In her opening remarks, she reminded us of three critical points. She reminded us that as a small island developing state, we are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The recent IPCC Working Group 2 report reminds us that we are in the dire warning of the impacts of climate change as we are having rising temperatures, which are intensifying extreme weather precipitation and spread of diseases, and global water and food security shortages. The report findings also underscore the urgency of global adaptation efforts to drive climate action. Another area that was highlighted was our challenges in terms of accessing financing, recognizing that because of our status, we no longer qualify or eligible to receive overseas development aid assistance. And this is one of the reasons we wanted to underscore the importance of partnerships and collaboration, because we have to be very efficient in the use of our resources and avoid duplication of efforts, which is very critical. And of course, there was also that plea to all project partners, both local, regional, and international, to provide support in technical and/or financial assistance when and where possible. We then went to the high-level segment where we had brief remarks, first from our Honorable Minister Eric Evelyn, Minister of Environment and Cooperatives, where he introduced the implementation plan and emphasized the ministry's commitment to the implementation of the NDC implementation plan. In his remarks, he highlighted the vision and strategy behind the country's NDC's implementation plan, and further emphasized the need to continue identifying and implementing adaptation, mitigation measures in a collective manner to ensure that we make the most effective use of our tools and methods that will help us to integrate climate change considerations into our planning and investment processes. He also reminds us of the importance to enhance mobilization and access to financial resources. The plan that was presented highlighted 4 main outcomes, which include reducing emissions within electricity and transport sectors through adoption of renewable energy, reducing electricity consumption through improved energy efficient measures, and also, which is very critical for us, enhancing our climate resilience and adaptation within key sectors such as agriculture, water, coastal ecosystems, tourism, and of course our health sector. The next set of remarks came from the Minister Honorable Sean Richards, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy, Public Infrastructure, Utilities, Posts, and Urban Development. In Minister Richards' remarks, he emphasized the need and the plans of his ministry to transition to renewable energy, which is in line with our NDC commitments. The Minister endorsed the implementation plan as it highlighted our renewable energy and energy efficient measures. Minister Richards has pledged his ministry's support to the launch of the plan, and also, which is of key importance to us, he referenced a few of the legislative frameworks that have already been undertaken. To this end, we were advised that there have been amendments to the energy legislation to promote the integration of renewable energy into the grid. There's also an opportunity for those who are interested because import duties for alternative energy equipment has been removed. And lastly, the ministry is in the process of developing a tariff to incentivize rooftop solar and small wind turbines. One of the things that stood with me was the importance of public-private partnership, and he highlighted that 2 of our corporate entities have already begun the demonstration in terms of jumping onto the renewable energy chain. Of mention was TDC and Hosford, who have, in collaboration, have installed in excess of 1.5 megawatts of solar PV on within their developments, within their businesses, The last set of remarks, as part of that high-level segment, was undertaken by Dr. Pablo Vieira, who regrettably could not join us in person but delivered his remarks virtually. Mr. Pablo Vieira is the Global Director of the NDC Partnership Support Unit and highlighted and provided a brief introduction of the NDC Partnership. The partnership, which has a member of more than 200 persons and organizations, recognize that the importance and the effects of climate change are interconnected, and so must our responses. Dr. Vieira explained the NDC Partnership process for coordination and resource mobilization, including partnership engagement and coordination. Reference was made of the Climate Action Enhancement Package that allows the NDC Partnership members to deliver targeted, fast-track support to countries to enhance quality, increase ambition, and implementation of NDCs. Reference was also made of the ECCB's engagement with the NDC Partnership and Initiative Readiness Support for Greening Banks, and later today we'll have a presentation from the ECCB. Before I hand over to Mr. Marissa Williams, in terms of the remarks, there were a few key takeaways that I want to just reference. 1, we are vulnerable. 2, we need to enhance climate resilience across all sectors. 3, we need to adopt more renewable energy and energy efficient measures. 4, money is scarce. We need lots of access to financial resources as well as technical support. But most importantly, it can only be done if we work together as one, as a team. Thank you. Nerissa?
Highlights from day 1 of our engagement. We were introduced to the official relationship with the NDC Partnership, which commenced in September of 2020 and continues to this day. The focal points, myself and Ms. Jeffers, were introduced officially yesterday as well. We were also advised that the revised NDC and NDC implementation plan was undertaken with support from the government of Norway through climate analytics. Ms. Jeffers has also alluded to the 4 outcomes of our plan, and she put that very succinctly. Highlighted were the next steps, including the circulation of the plan, the continuation of stakeholder engagement, reference to the total cost of the plan, US $878 million, with a funding gap of $750 million US. Next highlight, the pathway to the finalization of the coordination mechanism. We were introduced to the NCCC, which is the National Climate Change Committee. All of which require actors at all levels to respond and work together under a common vision that reflects both the urgency and long-term commitment needed for talking climate change. Another takeaway with respect to coordination, the implementation and monitoring part of it was that in addition to the plan and mode of engagement for NDC Partnership being presented in detail to development partners and the wider stakeholder pool, there was also the introduction of the in-country facilitator, Mr. Mishak Alford. Mr. Alford, aside from facilitating coordination in country and between St. Kitts and Nevis and the NDC Partnership, functions as the NDC Partnership's interface for refining support. The in-country facilitator introduced the online tool, which is the platform whereby, in addition to housing the implementation framework, does the following: provides real-time updating for all stakeholders, accommodates budget information, automatically generates reports, and is tailored to our needs if plans require adjustment. This is related to the questions or remarks segment, where participants essentially were trying to determine the how of our climate ambitions. In response, reassurance was given that the plan is a living instrument that will be responsive to the needs of all stakeholders who will continue to be engaged on a more intimate level. The tool underscores the increasingly important role we all have to play in ensuring that St. Kitts and Nevis can access the support we need for climate action. Toward this end, thank you for your commitment, those who joined us yesterday, and those who are present this day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies. As you have heard yesterday and today, the NDC Partnership has played a key role in assisting us in crafting the revised NDC and the NDC implementation plan. I would like to now call on Mr. Cayetano Casado to speak to the role of the NDC Partnership. Mr. Casado.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Can you hear me well? Hopefully you can, and I apologize for the brightness of the background. So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining this important roundtable. I am Cayetano Casado, and I am the Regional Manager for Latin America and the Caribbean at the NDC Partnership Support Unit. And I would like to tell you a little bit about the way the NDC Partnership Support Unit supports countries towards the implementation of their NDCs. Now I know that I've seen many familiar names and faces, and I know that many of you were here yesterday, so I won't go into too many details in the more general stuff and focus more on St. Kitts and Nevis. But let me perhaps start by saying that the NDC Partnership, it's an international platform that was created shortly after the Paris Agreement was approved, and with the mandate of facilitating NDC implementation, helping countries advance NDC implementation, and helping coordination with international organizations to mobilize support for countries for NDC implementation. And today we have over 200 members, and that membership includes developing countries, developed countries, international organizations, and international civil society organizations working on climate change. So the way we work with countries is to help foster a conversation to bring together all the needs that are required for NDC implementation and put them in a single framework. Now, depending on the country, of course, the contexts are very different, and in some cases that conversation has already happened and the results are already there. In others, conversations are ongoing and very active in some sectors, not in others, etc. So our process is really very flexible and adapts to the particular circumstances of each country. And the idea is that once the country has a clarity around their needs for NDC implementation, then the NDC Partnership Support Unit helps coordinating the resource mobilization for implementing those activities. And then it's the moment when we reach out to our membership developed countries with their bilateral cooperation arms, international organizations such as the UN agencies or multilateral development banks or international civil society organizations, to leverage those resources, that expertise, and make the best matches for what the country needs. So the NDC Partnership as such is not an implementing agency, but rather a platform that facilitates coordination and resource mobilization. Next slide, please. The main tool we use for this are what we call the partnership plans. In fact, these are NDC implementation plans, and they have received multiple names depending on the country. A particular name will be chosen. And as I was saying, each country is going to decide what the focus of these NDC implementation plans is going to be. Some countries choose these plans to focus only on where international support is needed. Some countries choose these plans to focus on everything that needs to happen for NDC implementation, or in particular sectors only. So it's really up to the country. But the rationale behind this framework is the same in all cases. It's to be a planning tool, and a document, a platform where a country can map and picture in the different needs and priorities that need to happen for NDC implementation. It's a tool that allows coordination because it's going to allow the definition on the different stakeholders that need to be active or leading the different needs that are pictured in the plan. It also serves to identify which international partners are coming in with support, and so it allows to initiate a dialogue with both domestic and international actors. It's a resource mobilization tool, as I was saying, because the ideally these needs are going to be costed, and there's going to be an indication on what funding is already there to implement these activities, be it public financing, private financing, or international financing. And it very importantly allows to identify where the gaps are, which of the different actions, which of the different outputs do not have financing yet. And so it serves as a basis for dialogue for international cooperation, for example, to mobilize support to bridge those gaps. And finally, it's a monitoring tool. This NDC partnership plans follow the logical framework structure. So it's very familiar, I'm sure, to all of you: outcomes, outputs, indicators, timeframe budgets, etc. So the structure and the way it's defined, it allows to run reports and so get an understanding on how implementation is progressing. And we for most countries now, the implementation plans are in an online platform, the online partnership plan tool that was, I believe, shared yesterday. But it enables a much easier access and updating of the plan as circumstances change. Next slide, please. So the process, again, this was explained yesterday. So very quickly, the government indicates the interest in developing their implementation plan. The process takes more or less six months. With COVID, it's taking a little bit longer. And it's a very consultative and participatory process in nature, led by the government with the assistance of the in-country facilitator, etc. And then at some point when the plan is completed with the demand side, I should say, that is that the needs and the priorities identified by the government are there, then we reach a moment where we circulate with partners, we map out existing support, and we ask for indications of future support to make the plan happen, and then the implementation phase along the time frame decided for each particular partnership plan. Next slide, please. And so where are we in St. Kitts and Nevis? In St. Kitts and Nevis, we are at the launch. This happened formally yesterday, and the plan was circulated to partners. It was circulated on March 31st, even though the official launch was first. And right now we are at the phase of mobilizing resources, mobilizing indications of support. And here I'd like to mention a couple of things. I think, first of all, the Minister Evelyn, I think, highlighted yesterday that the expectation that the plan is going to be a tool that is there to inform new programming and project development by international cooperation. And so it should serve as a basis for dialogue for future projects. And the plan should not only look at regional projects, or should not only include regional, country projects, national projects, but also look at regional projects. I think many international organizations in the Eastern Caribbean work regionally. So we definitely want to make sure we are considering those initiatives as well. So during the elaboration of the plan, some of these ongoing initiatives were already mapped in the plan, but we recognize that not necessarily all of them have been mapped out. So the first thing we are asking all partners is to make sure that if you have an ongoing project, be it focused in St. Kitts and Nevis or focused in the region that St. Kitts and Nevis benefits from it, to please share those inputs with us to make sure that they are adequately mapped against the plan, and thus the contribution to the different outputs and indicators is there. And second, share with us any new support that partners are looking to provide in alignment with the needs and priorities that are identified in the plan. And this is an ongoing conversation. We understand that each organization has different budget and programming cycles. So not everybody is going to be today in a situation where you can immediately commit to new support, but you may already have an idea or interest to support a particular topic or sector, and that intended, that potential support is already going to be a very welcome input. So we urge you to please consider this carefully and share your contributions with us through our in-country facilitator, through Mishak, or through the government, or through Raline and Teresa and Ivana, the support unit, by May 2nd. But as I was saying, ongoing conversation. If you think you're going to be able to provide a better answer in 2 months' time, let us know as well, so we have that in the radar, and we continue the conversation with you. Next slide, please. At this point, we are requesting that you provide your inputs around the Excel file, in the implementation plan. But in the future, we will move to the online tool. So I'm just showing here in the screen the partner support information section of this big Excel file, so you can insert your support as it is relevant. Next slide, please. And in the future, you will be able to do this in the online tool in a much more easier way. Next slide, please. And so, just to finalize, so what are the next steps for St. Kitts and Nevis implementation plan? First of all, we will be consolidating all your inputs up to May 2nd to the implementation plan, and we will be sharing that with government. In some cases, it will be very straightforward. In some cases, it will require further conversation. So the in-country facilitator will be coordinating and following up with discussions between government partners to concretize that new existing support. And once we have everything together, we're going to upload this to the online partnership plan tool. And after that, everybody will be able to access this tool. Some accesses will be provided, or the government can enable access to be provided, access to update or edit things in the tool in order to facilitate everybody's life. But as I was saying, we have a milestone here where we want to sort of have a plan already uploaded, but it's an ongoing conversation. As I was saying, we recognize different programming and budgeting cycles, so the conversation around resource mobilization continues. And again, government in-country facilitator, the support unit, country engagement specialists are going to be there to continue this conversation with you and facilitate that future offers of support can be aligned to the country's objectives in the plan and adequately recognized. We have a quarterly progress tool that the in-country facilitator takes care of, where he looks at what progress has happened over the past quarter, and so he will be, as part of this reports, also be engaging with those of you that have active projects, etc., to adequately map the progress. And then finally, and we will be talking about this a little bit later today, but just the idea that we will be working with the government in some sort of coordination mechanism with partners to make sure that coordination for NDC implementation keeps moving forward periodically. But as I said, this is going to come a little bit later in the agenda today. And this is all I wanted to share with you. Perhaps just a final note. So today is actually my last day at the NDC Partnership Support Unit. So I want to thank all of you, of course, the government, the facilitator, but also all the partners. I was saying many familiar faces that we've been interacting over the past almost 5 years. To thank you for all the support, all the proactiveness, and all the good work that we've been doing together in the region. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Casado. And to answer one of the questions that came up in the chat, yes, we will be sharing all the presentations with all the participants. Okay, I'd now like to invite Mr. Meshach Alford to present on the international support and private sector opportunities.
Good morning, all. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I am required to present on the international support and private sector opportunities as it relates to the implementation of the NDC. I would like to start off first by basically giving an overview of what the implementation and financing strategy would have highlighted as its context for the development of the financing strategy. So I'll move to the first slide. Ivana? Thank you. So the experts, the climate analytics would have started its work by looking at the institutional and economic framework that the funding of the implementation plan would have had to be working within. And so it considered, firstly, that from the institutional side of things, the Ministry of Sustainable Development, more particularly the Department of Economic Affairs and Public Sector Investment Planning, will be is the central and focus point for this kind of efforts and work, essentially because they have a mandate to coordinate local and regional international projects and prepare and manage the local PSIP. But also, too, that office stands as the NDA for the GCF, providing strategic oversight for GCF activities, et al. It is also the focal point to many or some of the agencies that are offering funding. I've identified here the CDB, the OAS, UNDP, UNEP, JEF, World Bank, and EU. And also, too, it also features mainly as it relates to the local or domestic budgetary process at the end of each year. So essentially, on the surface of it, and in depth as you look closer, it is actually central to the entire financial architecture for the country. And also you have finance, of course, the Ministry of Finance, that is concerned more about monitoring and evaluating the fiscal management by conducting the necessary audits. So I'll switch over to the economic side of things. And looking at the country in context, we are accustomed and we know that the tourism has been the mainstay of our economy, contributes some 63% of GDP up until 2020. Let me say that. But since the advent of COVID, we've seen a contraction in the economy, according to UNCTAD, by 16%, and looking at requiring this support of about 92 million in, going forward as it relates to the damages resulting from that. He also considered our debt to GDP situation, looking at the fact that we were about 60% in 2019, and because of COVID-19, we would have gone back up to 65% and would peak at somewhere about 72%. This is a report given by the IMF. But we are projected to reduce back to about 62 by 2026. So it's looking like we're going to be going up. All right, next slide. So given that context, climate analytics went further to not only do a cost analysis for the NDC based on the options articulated in the plan, but also did a cost-benefit analysis of the NDC implementation. Of course, in order to do so, for the costing, you would have modeled the energy sector, both SKN and NEVLEC, to reflect the various implementation scenarios in order to derive the necessary costing. And then also, too, you would have looked on the adaptation side at the national adaptation plans, because there are previous work that shows the costing for different activities. You also would have taken a look at the SKN water sector adaptation plan. That again has articulated not only certain projects or activities, but also some detailed costing. So they actually refer to existing previous work of the government to add to their costing work. And so they would have essentially, for the cost-benefit analysis, they would look at the capital expenditure, the operation expenditure, fuel costs, cost from implementing the National Adaptation Plan to determine the cost on that side. And then you look at the benefits. Of course, you'd have done using various methodologies and would have moved more to look at the avoided emissions by accounting for the social cost. I think somebody asked yesterday what other benefits are there outside of just the economic. And so that is a quick answer for that. Next slide, please. So our funding sources. The strategy asks for to diversify the funding sources. Given the gamut, $750 million is the gap. How do we raise that kind of financing? And so we have to look at various sources, starting from the domestic. Of course, the array of opportunities, looking at raising revenue through taxes, levies, fees, et al. You also look at the possibility of establishing green bonds, providing subsidies for specific goods and services that mitigate climate change impact, establishing domestic climate funds, and also give climate change adequate prominence in the local public sector investment programming. That's also a consideration because most of these you have to show some form of local ownership of it all. And so now onto the international side. The public sources can either be bilateral or multilateral. I've mentioned a couple of agencies that are already working with the government, providing support and investment over the years. And the strategy is essentially asking to put your focus back there, given the fact that we are still ODA not qualified for the ODA assistance. So you have asked us to look again more at the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, the Global Environmental Facility, the World Bank, Caribbean Development Bank, Caribbean Climate Change Center, the Global Facility for Disaster and Recovery. I think I could just pause briefly to say one of the challenges, because I see the notes require to discuss challenge, but I want to just note one in particular, that has to do with capacity to develop some of these same project proposals. And capacity, when I say that, I don't mean essentially that the skills are not in the respective departments and ministries, but we maybe don't have enough people to undertake the amount of work that needs to be done. And one of the essential recommendations is not in the plan, but I think something like procuring a climate finance expert to work with and develop that capacity locally is one of those essential recommendations that we must advance forward. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, private sources of support, both locally and internationally. For the purposes of engaging small and medium-sized enterprises, we are looking at the plan discusses accessing to funding through non-concessional loans, risk transfer mechanisms, blended finance and concessional loans, and philanthropic donations, and through public-private partnership. Now, I'm not going to go into detail to that because there's opportunities for discussion later on in the program, and so we have that opportunity then. Next slide, yeah. So during the engagement process, especially as it relates to the finalization of the NDC implementation plan, it was a process of meeting and really treating with the various stakeholders from the different sectors. And you would have to, not only were we validating the specific activities and the outcomes indicators, but we were discussing what projects exist within the various ministries, departments, some that are known, some that are on the surface, some that are beneath. And there are some that were identified, and the process is not yet completed. We still need to do ongoing discussions, and so we are open to that. What we are sharing here today, this is on the mitigation side mostly. For the broad emissions that were presented yesterday, climate change mitigation, we see projects, namely the Achieving a Rapid Decarbonization of the Energy Sector, that's a GEF project, Sustainable Energy Facility for the Eastern Caribbean, it's a GCF project, and you have, of course, the Leclanche project, which is a public-private partnership arrangement. I have put there the 11th EDF, which is European-sponsored, European Union, and the Improving Environmental Management through Sustainable Land Management project. This is a very cross-cutting project which that captures a number of sectors, and I think we have representatives here for that project who will give more details on that as we discuss later on. can't see the last one, but I believe this is the CARICOM Regional Efficiency Building Code. That's a project that is going on in the regional to deal with the building codes, especially as it relates to the tourism sector and also coastal and marine sectors. All right, next slide. Next slide mostly deals with on the climate resilience side. That area has most outputs. A number of projects, I think I've counted up to about 17 projects, major projects. There are some smaller ones that are not going to be presented on today. But I can't see the top of the slide. But the first one is enhancing civil society access and readiness for climate finance. It's a GCF sponsored readiness project. Of course, this is seeking to see how you can get the civil society engaged in climate financing, implementation. And so that is a major project that is ongoing. Capacity building to support accreditation, planning, programming, and implementation. That's a GCF as well. And also you have the capacity building to facilitate climate resilience and so on. That last one, third one, I think deals a lot with response mechanisms and upgrading and updating places like the Met Office and all these things. Assessment for the design and implementation of a comprehensive institutional framework, mainstreaming SDGs and the national development processes. We spoke yesterday about interagency coordination mechanism. I think that speaks to some element of that and more. The improving environmental management through sustainable land management project. This is very cross-cutting. It should have started, I think, sometime this year in January about, and should run for about 60 months. It touches on areas to do with climate smart agriculture, touches on enhancing existing legislation and policy frameworks. It touches on integrated coastal zone management and also integrated water resource. I think to some extent that it covers a whole host of things that are covered under the NDC. So that is a project to look at. And it also deals with the capacity building, especially at the grassroots levels. I think yesterday you would have heard me spoke about capacity development for farmers and fisher folks and so on. So that project is one to really look at. Enhancing agricultural adaptive capacity to climate variability. This is sponsored by the Taiwan ICDF. This project again deals with some of the climate smart agriculture and the technologies to be adopted. This would have been to set up some of the meters, the rain gauges and so on, the weather stations around St. Kitts and Nevis, and looking at to see how you can integrate them as well and to make sure you have information feeding to the required public. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. Can't see the one on the one on top is a project that was first developed for the sustainable forest management. You would have gone on to include matters to do with climate change. It's a project sponsored by the GCF. It's still a concept note in concept stage. And so when I spoke about getting assistance of international climate experts to help us to develop capacity to finish off, this is one of those projects that is an example of where we have project concepts that identify issues, and these are based on consultations, deep and wide consultations over a long period of time, and just need the extra effort to have these things advanced. Building resilience in the water supply sector is also a project concept. Again, that's something that we refer to in order to identify some of the activities that we might need to put into the NDC to support the integrated water resource management component in that plan. The conserving biodiversity and reducing habitat degradation in protected areas. This project has now come to a close in a sense, but I think there are still some areas that perhaps weren't implemented in full that we also took a look at to see what other things that we can put into the NDC for further project development. There's also the IRECO project that also is kind of cross-cutting as well. It touches on integrated water resource management. It touches on, I think, some waste issues. I think, yes, and so that's also cross-cutting. So we have that segment to do with health under the plan. Enhancing climate resilience in the CARICOM countries, to be determined. I don't remember what exactly that one was about, but I put it in there just for the discussions later today. And the St. Kitts Marine Biodiversity Ecosystem Assessment Project. That one started in 2019, and that one was done by the UNDP. We have all of the different agencies would have been identified down on the right-hand side, just to give an understanding of the different agencies that are operating within this space. All right, next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Misha. If you have any questions, please hold them for the end of the session, because we have 3 presentations coming up now on regional opportunities to support NDC implementation. So for the first one, I would like to invite Ms. Kiran St. Omar from the Central Bank to do her presentation. Ms. St. Omar.
Good morning, all, and we are truly honored to be a part of this roundtable discussion as the ECCB notes the urgency in addressing the paucity of climate finance in the region, not only in terms of availability, but access due to the challenges, which I'm sure we have elaborated on over the day and, well, this morning from yesterday. Apologies, I did miss yesterday's session, but I'm here, of course, to filter any questions and to also provide insight on what the ECCB is doing to drive change and to assist member states in partnership with the NDC Partnership under the readiness support for greening central banks. So today, I will be presenting on more or less, next slide, please, more or less some of the our earlier work over the last 2 years and various initiatives we are looking to pilot. Apologies. The ECCB notes there are several challenges, especially in terms of renewables transition. And so far, we are heavily dependent on fuel-based power generation, despite very high access rates in the region, some amounting to at least over 90% in terms of access to energy. But the cost of electricity is extremely high, right next to Germany, which in several reports would be signaled as having some of the highest electricity rates. However, when we look at standard of living and ability to afford that, the region, when we look at the average wage rate, it is a very difficult situation for us and not sustainable. So in all, the opportunity cost for the region as a whole, we're noting that at least 1.2 billion EC dollars has been spent on fuel import bills. And of course, we're sacrificing investments in social or socioeconomic initiatives and sectors like education and health. And on top of that, which is the focus of, I guess, the roundtable here today, is the investment need to accelerate the transition and to deploy renewable energy technologies to meet our NDC goals or to more or less the broader sustainable development goals. When we look at the landscape in terms of initiatives, a lot has been done, and a lot of our regional partners here have been committed to this initiative, which we're very happy to see for several years. But the transition has been slow, and in several jurisdictions, you see there's more interest in central banks taking up the mantle to tackle climate finance risks and broader natural disasters risks. And the ECCB notes that we need to align our financial system architecture to help deploy those initiatives to attain the 2030 transition or to achieve that agenda. So we're here to also learn some more about what St. Kitts is doing and partner with some of the partners on here. More or less some definite coordination based on what I've heard today would be very prudent for us to more or less deliver scale and value in very short time that we have. Next slide, please. Just a snapshot in terms of what is happening globally and what we're paying attention to. The ECCB has not been able, well, the ECCU, the region as a whole, has not been able to capture any flows when you look at the sustainable investment markets. Yes, as you would have heard in prior presentations, the dwindling availability of concessional finance, and St. Kitts does no longer qualify for ODA development assistance. So we have to be innovative. We have to find customized, innovative financial solutions to help build that sustainable flow of capital to deliver on those on these agendas. And one of the things we're noting is of the funds raised in terms of green issuance over the last 2 years, 35% of that was directed at energy, transport, and as well buildings in terms of energy efficiency, resilience, and adaptation technologies. So for us at the ECCB, we note to assist member states, we must bring about some innovative financing solutions. Next slide, please. What are we doing to drive change? For us at the ECCB, that means aligning the financial system to deliver on climate action. And financial market policy is key. We continue to advocate and work with member states, as we're doing here today, and also through the NDC Partnership initiative, and promote that enabling environment. While we do that, in parallel, the ECCB will be developing different financing instruments, risk transfer mechanisms to unleash and unlock climate finance and develop, of course, the sustainable finance market, which is non-existent today. So that will include mainstreaming green and climate-aligned instruments and for transition finance. Next slide, please. One of our flagship initiatives is the Green Finance, Greening the Financial System pilot, And this falls under an umbrella initiative, what we've launched as of last year, the ECCU Renewable Energy Infrastructure Investment Facility. I will provide a little more on that, but I'm zooming in here on the supporting initiatives. The Greening the Financial System pilot, we see the need to mainstream environmental, social, and governance risks within the financial system beyond regulation and supervisory, but also, as I said, and I've been saying, to attract climate finance. So for instance, the CCB will be developing guidelines and frameworks for green bond. We do have the regional government securities market, which most of our participating member states do use and to raise financing. Beyond that, we're looking to bring in green finance markets through the issuance of these green instruments. As well, we'll be working with Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Sustainable Development, and different related sectors to help take an economic-wide, unified approach to developing these frameworks and to increase education and awareness while we implement those new financing innovations. In addition to that, we see the need for advisory and sub-services based on the gaps, especially when you look at renewable energy financing, and there in terms of transaction advisory support and the structuring of projects. The ability to access the international capital markets is one of the key aspects of our initiative. And we've also identified here some of the innovative solutions in terms of what types of products we're looking into to develop and make available throughout the financial system. And of course, the creation of new financing vehicles. In optimizing the sources of finance, we note the dwindling availability of concessional finance, and we have to move away from that. We have to become independent in how we do things in the ECCU. So for us, we're looking to create funding windows via dedicated sustainable energy funds to address some of the challenges and gaps I've noted before. And that will require the optimization of concessional resources with capital market flows from the regional and international markets to enable us to finance at the scale. And of course, we've heard the gap that St. Kitts need to have covered for the implementation of the NDC, and we're happy to expedite and accelerate the delivery of those to enable and facilitate and support the implementation of their plan. So our roadmap to climate finance, we're looking to launch those facilities by the end of 2022. And of course, with a few pilot projects that will be financed. Our key partner in the development of that facility is the World Bank Group, and we've also contracted a consulting team, climate finance advisors, and Castalia, who's working with us, and with various focal points across the ECCU to help more or less implement the initiative. So in the coming months, we will be engaging in some stakeholder roundtables to increase awareness and to curate that pipeline of projects and assess the investment readiness. So it's very pleasing to hear that St. Kitts will be doing their IRP very soon, and that will be very instrumental in enabling us to move forward and progress with the government of St. Kitts under that initiative. Next slide, please. Just a snapshot into what the facility will do. We see those funding windows, as I would have mentioned, some of the gaps. When we look at, are we able to attract finance within the ECCU, that is not only from within, but outside as well. We will look to mobilize that based on the frameworks I mentioned, the green finance framework, sustainable investment markets that we're developing to enable those flows, because market integrity is very key, and having those guidelines in terms of monitoring and measuring the impact of those instruments will determine how successful you are in terms of those issuances. And reporting as well is a key aspect of that. The pipeline of investment-ready infrastructure projects that is under development, so we're able to deploy and accelerate those deployments within the next 10 years. And of course, to be able to increase the renewable energy component in our power generation mix, those projects would have to be deployed a lot sooner within the next 2 to 3 years to enable us to see any real progress or impact. And our strategic partners here today, certainly we're inviting and will be engaging with you further alongside with the NDC Partnership to encourage investments into those different projects, and not only in terms of mitigation, but adaptation and resilience. And in terms of the collaboration with the NDC Partnership, we are currently, just a quick update in terms of installing those advisors that have been hired. We would have closed out the procurement process and are now implementing them. They will be embedded within the ECCB to work on regional frameworks and strategies and a roadmap for mainstreaming climate finance and ESG finance throughout the financial system, not only with commercial banks, but with national development banks, other single regulatory units, and through the capital market intermediaries, different institutions like the regulator and the exchange as well, to help expedite the realization of those products to help in attracting climate finance. Thank you.
Emmanuel from the OECS. Ms. Emmanuel.
Thank you, PSUs. Good morning, everyone. Shani Emmanuel once again from the OECS. And you can go to the next slide. I will be presenting on some of our initiatives that we see as a way to support St. Kitts and Nevis in their NDC implementation. So, of course, the OECS Commission is firmly committed to assisting its member states individually and collectively in their efforts to build climate-resilient, low-carbon economies. Currently, we have several initiatives that I'm going to present today that are already on stream to continue to support St. Kitts and Nevis in their NDC implementation. The ones I'm speaking about are the NDC Finance Initiative, the OECS Climate Change Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan, and the GeoBuild project, as well as some of the tools that we've developed that would, of course, help St. Kitts and Nevis as they work to implement this NDC. Next slide, please. So the Caribbean NDC Finance Initiative is a joint initiative of the OECS Commission and the government of St. Lucia that was established with the political support from the UNFCCC and under the auspices of the NDC Partnership. And it aims to advance and accelerate NDC implementation and Caribbean climate action. It has initiated a non-traditional engagement, which includes governments, development partners, and the private sector. And I was really happy to have Mr. Alford before speak about private sector engagement, because we do know that bringing our Caribbean private sector into the climate action mix is important. Ultimately, the NDC Finance Initiative seeks to contribute to the region's efforts to implement NDCs and any complementary actions that may exist. Next slide, please. Our flagship project that we're working on right now under the NDCFI is the Eastern Caribbean Solar Challenge. And the aim of this is to increase the deployment of renewable energy technologies in support of corporate, household, national, and regional goals to enhance energy and climate resilience while contributing to the protection of the climate. So the Solar Challenge works on various levels. Anybody can go to the website, which is solarchallenge.ocs.org, and register to be part of the challenge. That's some person or a family that's putting solar on their roof. That can be a small or medium enterprise that's putting solar, or even the government. If there's a large scale solar project, they can register it there. We are currently looking at ways to raise funds in order to allow for public sector solar deployment, as well as working with our financial institutions throughout the region to allow for better access to finance for individuals and also for small and medium enterprises in order to be able to do that. Apart from this, the NDCFI is also working on private sector engagement, which we started a couple of years ago, really looking at how we can better support the private sector in helping countries to achieve their climate action goals and their NDC goals. And of course, we invite anybody to have this conversation with us. One of the ways that we've been engaging private sector is to look at carbon markets, which we know is a fairly new area for the region, but we do see that it being one of the areas that our private sector can participate in. So the OECS is working right now to continue to raise awareness about carbon markets and how we can possibly engage. Next slide, please. Another project that we have ongoing is the GeoBuild project. Now, this is a fairly new project that we just launched earlier this year, actually. And this is under our sustainable energy portfolio. But of course, as we know, St. Kitts and Nevis NDC has quite a bit on energy and on geothermal energy. So the 5 countries that are set to be able to access or be part of this project are Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The GeoBuild project has 4 major components, which are capacity building for planning, exploration, and project management, enhancing the policy, legislative, and regulatory environment. Of course, knowledge management and public awareness. We know the history of geothermal in our region. And so we definitely want to have a very big focus on public awareness and helping everybody to understand how geothermal can help this region and how best to tap into those resources. And the final component would be regional coordination and, of course, sharing in geothermal energy, not just for OECS, but for CARICOM, wider CARICOM. Some of the immediate outcomes would be the enhanced institutional and technical capacity for geothermal within the OECS, and of course for planning, development, management, and maintenance of geothermal projects, enhanced policy, legislative, and regulatory framework for supporting the energy sector, and also improving that knowledge management and public awareness. And what we really want at the end of that would be clean and indigenous energy that transforms and drives development within our region. And now more than ever, we know what it means to have clean energy and how that can help transform our actual overall economies, as we are all seeing coming out of COVID. Next slide, please. The final thing I wanted to speak to you about is the OECS Climate Change Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan, which was endorsed by our Council of Ministers on the Environment in 2021. And this has 3 transformative pathways to build an analytical base to systemize and share relevant climate change information, practices, tools, and methods to support adaptation, We know one of our biggest issues in this region, we've been continually told, is data, both collecting the right data, but also maintaining data information systems where we have them readily available to all of us. So that's part of this strategy and action plan. Secondly, it is to provide adaptation technical expertise and support to any adaptation efforts, such as learning by doing, of course, having pilot projects or large-scale projects that, of course, later on we share with the rest of the region. And finally, to identify and fund creative and sustained transformative efforts that support climate resilient development. And climate resilient development is really the end goal of this strategy and action plan. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give some tools that we have already developed that are available on our website that, of course, St. Kitts and Nevis and anybody else on the call can access and perhaps use. So one of them is our tools kit to mainstream ecosystem-based adaptation, gender equality, and social inclusion. The second being the electric mobility decision makers toolkit. The third being lessons learned in NDC revision for the Eastern Caribbean. These are lessons from Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, and St. Lucia. We also have the NDCFI web portal, which has a lot of NDC related information that you can go in, sign up, and get information. It's also a platform for exchanges among countries, so sharing experiences, good or bad, and it's a platform where you can discuss with other experts in the region. And finally, we do have an ecosystem-based and gender experts registry, which you can actually see who the experts in various adaptation fields, as well as gender and social fields are in the region. And of course, you have access to their direct information, and so you can contact them directly using that registry. Next slide. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, okay, and I would now like to invite Mr. Carlos Ruiz Gavia for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hughes, and thank you very much to Cayetano and Rallian Beckers from the NDC Partnership, to all the authorities from St. Kitts and Nevis and colleagues, participants. It's a pleasure to be today with you. I will be speaking on behalf of UNFCCC and particularly the Regional Collaboration Center for the Caribbean, RCC St. George's. Next slide, please. This presentation is divided into 3 sections. So I will be talking about the RCC Regional Collaboration Center that is at your disposal to advance the NDC work of the island, but also some regional activities that we're undertaking that can be used to support implementing the Paris Agreement. I will also touch base on some of the latest developments in terms of the work program, mainly coming up from the COP26 negotiations in November in Glasgow last year. So we will be updating you on some of these developments. And the last part of this presentation will be co-shared with my colleague, Caroline. She will be presenting more elements on the project called Need-Based Finance that I think at this point in time for this event could be very helpful. Thank you. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of background to those that are not familiar with the centers. In the UNFCCC, we established with the support of partners and under the leadership of the executive board of the CDM, a network of 6 regional collaboration centers in Global South. I have the privilege to support the work of St. George's. That was the first one launched a few years ago, initially with the aim to support on the implementation of the clean development mechanism in the area of course, carbon markets. But then as we move forward with the Paris Agreement, the support has expanded to translate the complexities of the negotiation to the region and feedback also onto the negotiation process from the region back to the negotiation process. So our main role there is, of course, to facilitate the exchange of information, to implement the mandates to the Secretariat at the regional level, but also we facilitate the liaison with the various divisions and teams that we have at the Secretariat in Bonn. You can also see that we network with other RCCs, particularly trying to harmonize the work in Latin America, but also some other parts in Global South. In the case of RCC St. George's, we partnered with the WINREF Foundation, is at the St. George's University, to much of our work and collaboration also is around adaptation, resilience, health, and climate. Next slide, please. So you'll see that the main impact in the region has been supporting regional collaboration, but we also promote technical capacity. For example, we are hosting the MRB Hub initiative funded by IKI, and in that capacity, all the 16 countries that we support in the Caribbean has been active, benefiting from capacity building activities, but also advancing on the MRB arrangements towards the enhanced transparency framework. We also work with NDC Partnership before in other areas of NDC ambition and implementation, and conducted some surveys on the developments and the needs to enhance the support to countries. You see there our regional and geographical coverage, and you see a picture of the St. George's University that is hosted the center. And in that center, we closely collaborate with other partners like the GIZ, but also regularly with the NDC Partnership and the GCF, the Green Climate Fund. Please, next slide. This is, in a nutshell, the supported structure. We have the steering committee member from WINREF, Randy, supporting the center, but also very well equipped in terms of technical expertise, liaising also to a range of experts from Bonn. You can see that Caroline is listed in the structure, and she will be talking about climate finance, but we also have Ama Kisiwa that is supporting on various technical and administrative operational matters of the center, supporting the team as a regional lead, transitioning. As you know, Ventura has been supporting the center until not long ago, but he's moved back to Bonn, and so we are transitioning to a new team lead that will be announced shortly, but in the time being, of course, collaborating with Bonn and the team to implement the mandates that I will show next. Before moving into the work plan, I would like to say a few words. Next slide, please. So when we talk about our team, I'd like to park here and talk a little bit in the loving memory of Dr. Hugh Seeley. As you know, he was instrumental to the negotiation process, but also instrumental to the establishment of the RCC. So thank you, Hugh, for all the work that you've done with the RCC and for the region. You'll miss, but your legacy, it's with us. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. We have a moment for Hugh at the MENA Climate Week a week ago, and yeah, it's with sadness that we remember Hugh and his contributions. I will now talk about the work program of the center. Next slide, please. You will see it's quite comprehensive, but we can, in a nutshell, summarize the areas of support covering basically the progress on NDCs and long-term strategies from ambition to implementation. So it's very relevant to the discussions of this event. But we also, as I mentioned, we have a very robust collaboration framework where we facilitate, liaise, and support the work of other organizations and agencies supporting the countries to implement their NDCs and other aspects of the Paris Agreement. I won't go into the details, but in a nutshell, we have a few of mandates on adaptation. We are promoting and supporting countries on the elaboration of the national action plans. We also conducting some capacity building. For example, in the upcoming weeks, you will hear and receive invitations to participate on the local communities and indigenous groups platform. That it's a workshop, mandated workshop that will take place before the SBs in Bonn this year. On mitigation, much of the attention is now on the implementation of carbon markets, the Article 6, and we are implementing a round of capacity building activities, identifying the need of countries to move forward with the transition of the clean development mechanism, including standardized baselines important in the Caribbean, to other arrangements under the 6.2 and 6.4 decisions under Article 6 carbon markets. In terms of means of implementation, you will hear more about finance, but also we have other activities relating to technology, climate innovation, and also, as mentioned, capacity building efforts. On transparency as well, enhancing the MRB capacities of the Caribbean through the MRB hub mainly, but we also implement a couple of workshops. In middle May, there will be a workshop where most of the focal points on transparency will be invited to participate in an in-person workshop in Grenada. So stay tuned. And finally, also other areas of development under the Sustainable Development and SDGs, for example, engagement of youth, gender. You probably hear about the work on Agile to bring also the competence and knowledge up to speed of youth in terms of the outcomes of the negotiation or specific areas, for example, on energy transition and enhanced transparency framework. Next slide, please. This is just in a nutshell some of the partnership arrangements that we have. We have recently signed an MOU with IDB, so on financial support and mobilization. We are enhancing our capacities. You will learn more about the MBF project from Caroline, but we also have another areas of support and implementation, supporting the constellation of UN agencies, for example, or in terms of the global climate action. We work with the youth and academy on implementing some capacity building activities, or for example, working on the development of carbon markets projects like SIACA, with the support on some multilateral agencies, but also regional organizations and intergovernmental organizations that are sectorially based and focused, like, for example, ARENA, or recently some activities undertaken with the GIZ on carbon markets. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to pass the mic to my colleague, Caroline. She will be presenting the needs-based finance project. Thank you. Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As Carlos said, my name is Caroline Blenman, and on behalf of RCC St. George's, I will provide you with a summary of the UNFCCC's initiative, the Needs-Based Finance Project. As encapsulated by the Paris Agreement, there is an urgent need to enhance the provision of finance, technology transfer, and capacity building, and to ensure the predictability and alignment of finance for nationally defined climate and sustainable development goals. Next slide, please. I will begin with a general overview of the Need-Based Finance Project, provide details on such projects across the Caribbean region, and lastly, insights into national and regional opportunities to advance NDC-related implementation efforts. Next slide, please. The UNFCCC is the focus of the political process to address climate change. It supports the convention through its Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement by a range of activities, including substantive and organizational support to meetings of the parties. The NBF project was proposed to the Secretariat in response to a mandate it received from the Conference of the Parties to the UNFCCC by Decision 6, COP23, paragraph 10, and reiterated by Decision 4, COP26, paragraph 22, which requested the UNFCCC, in collaboration with operating entities of the financial mechanism, UN agencies, and bilateral, regional, and other multinational channels, explore ways and means to assist developing country parties in assessing their needs and priorities in a country-driven manner, including technological and capacity building needs, and in translating their climate finance needs into actions. Launched in late 2017, the project is currently active in 12 regions, covering 100 countries in collaboration with regional integration organizations. The project seeks to contribute to the achievement of the UNFCCC Secretariat's strategic priorities regarding the provision of support to developing countries for achieving their goals and commitments in the context of the Paris Agreement. The NBF project also builds on and complements existing climate finance work on the way in member countries and helps to establish collaborations, harness networks, and avoid duplication. Next slide, please. Thank you. In fulfillment of the overall objective of the NBF project, the following principles are maintained. Facilitate activities in a country-driven manner, that is by participating countries via support from the UNFCCC and the RCCs. Collaborate with regional, national, and international partners whilst being cognizant of their prior and ongoing work. Covers all financial sources, channels, and instruments, and as depicted below, includes 4 main outputs or deliverables in all NBF project activities. This includes a technical assessment of current needs and finance flows that will support the development of a strategy for mobilizing and facilitating access to climate finance, followed by a pipeline of priority projects, initiatives, investments, funds, and facilities and programs. And lastly, an investment plan, including required support. Next slide, please. The NBF approach involves an analysis of the situation in terms of current finance flows and needs, as articulated in country submissions to the UNFCCCs, such as the NDCs, TNAs, NAPs, NAPAs, BERS, and NCs, in addition to the GCF and other multilateral development banks, country programming documents, materials, and strategies. The approach also involves an analysis of barriers, relevant policy plans, and the validation of the technical annex by countries. Step 2 involves the development of a climate finance access and mobilization strategy that includes an implementation plan and pipeline of priority projects and initiatives. This step culminates in the validation and adoption of the strategy. Step 3 involves the mobilization of climate finance following a high-level endorsement of the strategy by countries. This step facilitates coordination and resource mobilization for priority projects and initiatives. Next slide, please. Usually, the implementation of national and regional outputs or the ways in which the NBF project is implemented, and there are a few cases in which countries have requested assistance on a national basis. In Antigua and Barbuda, the project was implemented by the Department of Environment as the national focal point for climate change in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance and Corporate Governance. This project was implemented over the period May 2019 to July 2020. In Belize, the UNFCCC Secretariat collaborated with the government of Belize on the NBF project, which resulted in the publication of 2 technical reports, which collectively act as a technical input into the climate finance strategy developed by the government. Next slide, please. Regional NBF projects may involve 2 or more countries led by a regional entity or designated country government. In the Caribbean, separate regional NBF projects will be implemented in collaboration with the OACS Commission and the CARICOM Secretariat. They are designed to deliver regional clarity on access to and the mobilization of climate finance, including support for the needs identified by the OACS and CARICOM regarding the implementation of priority projects and investments, in accordance with the goals outlined in their NDCs, NAPs, and other relevant national policies and/or strategies. These regional MBFs will draw on successes in Latin America, West and East Africa, Asia, and the specific regions. It is hoped that during the project development and implementation phases, there will be success in liaising with the CARICOM Secretariat and the OECS Commission in efforts to minimize the possibility of duplicated efforts across the region. The MBF project for the OECS was launched in March 2022, whereas the MBF for CARICOM is still in its preparatory phase. As part of an earlier collaboration between the OECS and UNFCCC Secretariat, an assessment of the existing climate finance flows in the OECS region, relevant regional policies, the financial sector, capital market, and banking sector were conducted based on available data, official country documents, and consultations. The resulting technical paper will be provided as an input into the work to be undertaken under the MBF OECS project. Next slide, please. This section highlights national and regional opportunities to advance NDC-related implementation. To reiterate, under the MBF project, all national communications to the UNFCCC, relevant policies and plans articulated by multinational donors and country governments at various levels of scope are reviewed. This is done to ascertain developing country needs, assess existing financing gaps, barriers to access, and the mobilization of climate finance. In this regard, the MBF project thereby reaffirms country and regional needs by the articulation of priority projects in support for climate action, and can therefore provide greater insights into the priority of actions within NDC participating countries. Noting the successes in other RCC regions, the MBF projects conducted across the Caribbean have the potential to create and maintain synergies for collaboration in adaptation and mitigation projects. This will thereby scale up activities and create opportunities for economic advancement by the pursuit of climate resilient development that otherwise would be deemed as far-fetched. The existence of such synergies thereby seeks to promote greater North-South and South-South cooperation, both interregionally and extra-regionally, via the provision of technical assistance, knowledge transfer, and capacity building. This concludes our presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ruiz Gavia and Ms. Bierman. I wish to echo and join in the condolences to the RCC, Barbados, and the family on the loss of Dr. Seeley. His contributions to the work on climate change were immense, and he will be missed tremendously. I would like to recommend that we take a moment of silence for Dr. Seeley. Thank you. Now we are a bit behind time, so I would like to recommend that we take an extremely short break, go collect your refreshments and come back. And also we are going to merge the Q&A from this session with the next session. So when we come back, we'll go into the general discussion. So we'd like to break now. This is an opportunity for those online to stretch their legs, get a coffee, and come back. Thank you. Everyone, I will now like to call on Mr. Mishak Alford and Miss Raleen Beckers to moderate this section, Q&A section.
Thank you so much. I also would like to introduce myself and our team, because I realized we hadn't done that. But my name is Raleen Beckers. I'm from the NDC Partnership Support Unit. We also have on the line, of course, Cayetano, who you heard earlier, as well as Clarissa Lena and Ivana Valdez, who are really the masterminds behind the slides and everything. So I just wanted to give them some recognition. They're actively participating on the line as well. So we first would, is it correct that you cannot hear us online? Hopefully it works now. But let's first, before we dive into our discussion on resource mobilization, we would like to move into the Q&A from the last session. So I'm just looking around the room to see if there are any questions on any of the presentations that were provided. So we're going to do for each Q&A or each discussion point, we'll check the room first, see if you can then raise your question in the microphone that's standing there, and then we'll move to the online speakers who we're kindly asking to raise their hands to raise any other questions. So. Any questions on the presentations you heard earlier? Please come on up to the mic. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And I would like to thank all the people who had a part in putting on this forum. It was very useful. It's very useful. I missed yesterday because of a schedule conflict, but I'm happy to be here. Now, I have a comment. There's something that the presenter from ECCB said that provoked a thought, right? In essence, she said we need to move away from focusing on concessional funding. And that struck a pin. It struck a nerve with me because from a foreign policy perspective, we are instinctively taught that we should leverage all the resources that we have. We should leverage every single forum to make our concerns known. And access to concessional funding is one of the cornerstones of our foreign policy. Now, we can argue about the nuances of the extent to which we can focus on concessional funding, but from my perspective and from a small state's perspective, I think we should really leverage all of that, all of the opportunities we have to gain concessional funding, because it's based on vulnerability. And we can never be not small. We can never be, we have some structural challenges. We can't be quote unquote unsmall. Okay? One hurricane or one volcano can erode our GDP. It can set us back by 10 years. COVID, Mishak said it. We were about 60% of our GDP. At one time we were 200%. But with some prudent fiscal maneuverings, we were able to get to 60. We got to 60, we bragged about it. Next thing, COVID came, take us back to 68%. Erode 8%. So it's something which we have to have at the forefront of our consciousness at all times. We cannot afford to relax. You cannot let a UN General Assembly come and you have the world stage and you don't make a statement on concessional financing. I would even push it further and say grants, because there's some reparatory justice which is involved in making a request for a grant. We should never lose track of these things. So I am very concerned when our bank pushing that as a talking point. Okay, it's not a criticism, but I just want us to be real and be conscious of our reality, because these things, while we can be creative, even when we are creative, let's look at our CBI. Let's look at our financial services sector. These are profitable, yet they are bombarded by the international community. Let's look at tourism. One travel advisory can set us back. So we need, as small states, we need to always be conscious of these realities. Otherwise we'll become lackadaisical. We'll just be depending on loans. And we cannot only depend on loan from a central bank or from a multilateral institution, from the IMF and the World Bank and those things. Those things come with cost. So the extent to which we can use our relationship with Japan, Taiwan and the others to get concessional financing and grants, by all means, go for it. And they should be encouraging us to be creative in how we coach our language and how we request. In fact, last month, I'm going to wrap up now, but we had a bilateral with the UK. And from the discussions, the UK was saying, we will assist you in approaching the insurance companies, in reassessing how they value risk. These are things we need, these kind of partnerships. If you can get the UK to speak to Lloyd's of London, which will have a trickle-down effect on all of the other insurances that we have. If you can say, look, small countries like St. Kitts and Nevis are vulnerable. We are inherently vulnerable. Climate change, sea level rise, all of these things are a threat, existential threat. If you can actually put that into the mix, into the analysis of how you categorize risk and loss and damage and all of those very critical points, they would have done a lot for us. So that is where we need to actually steer the discussion. And I would like to urge the central bank to really focus on this. I didn't hear the word vulnerability one time in the presentation. You know, so I mean, we are inherently vulnerable. But we are creative. So I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see if there's any other questions from the room before we turn to the online participants. Anyone else wants to ask a short question? Please stick to 1 minute maximum, because we have many more people to go. Please go ahead. Yeah, but we'll go to the room first.
Hi, yes, good morning. A very short question directed to the OECS Commission and the presentation. I'm seeking a bit more clarity, or if they can elaborate on the carbon market initiatives that they spoke about with regard to engaging the private sector for partnerships and funding. So if they could just elaborate a bit on that. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Any final question on the presentations? All right, let's then move to Laverne Quealy from the Ministry of Finance. Unmute.
Good morning, colleagues. I would like to commend the Ministry of Environment and Cooperatives for the work that has been done to date in regards to the NDC implementation plan and the revision of the NDC itself, and to thank our partner, the NDC Partnership, for their support and the other entities in this regard. First, I would like to correct something that Mr. Alford said in his presentation. he mentioned the Ministry of Sustainable Development as the focal point for the GEF, the World Bank, CDB, and the EU. That is incorrect. Those focal points rest within the Ministry of Finance under the ambit of the Financial Secretary. That is important so that persons will know exactly to whom they would need to engage as we move forward in the process. I feel particularly honored to be following my colleague, Mr. Berridge, on his intervention, because he made some critical points that are important to the discussion. The concessional lending, St. Kitts and Nevis does not have access to concessional lending. There are entities such as the Green Climate Fund that, depending on your initiative that you put forward, would present to you the option of loans to finance your initiative, which, as he says, is quite alarming to us because we are a small island developing state. The fund was established to assist us. We are the ones who are on the front lines of the impact of climate change. And we have been calling out to the international community to make a decision. It's either they would want to see us as climate refugees, or they are actually going to assist us and not perpetuate a cycle where we continue to find ourselves mired in debt. As he said, we cannot change what we are, nor can we change our location, because we know what happens every year between June and November. Everyone is on pins and needles, and we're just praying for something not to happen. As much as we build resilience, we will always remain vulnerable. And it is ironic that he mentioned the vulnerability aspect, because in the international community, that has not yet been taken up as a key criteria by which we are evaluated and in which funding is dispersed or made available. Most recently, there was a COP in regards to, I think, land degradation, where the discussion came forward because of the fact that during the GEF negotiations, there was a discussion in regards to including a vulnerability index. And this was not met kindly by other countries. And they highlighted the fact that the conventions do not specify SIDS or the vulnerability aspect. And so those things remain an issue for us. I commend my colleagues at the ECCB for their efforts. And so the Ministry of Finance looks forward to the discussions with them in regards to matters to do with the green bonds and the other initiatives that they're undertaking. I want persons to remember, because I have noted from also the presentation from Mr. Alford, the highlighting of the need to raise revenue, which would include taxes. There were mentioned yesterday of incentives, and there's highlighting of the green bonds. No matter how we look at it, these things need to be taken and looked upon very carefully, as they also have impact in regards to how we can pay our bills and our debt sustainability and how that fits into the aspect of things. Mr. Berridge already mentioned what we lost in terms of our debt to GDP accomplishment. And so there have to be careful discussion. There would have to be assessments done. The information would have to include, or I should say, the discussion would have to include partnership with the Ministry of Finance, because whatever is proposed must then be placed in our models to ascertain what is feasible moving forward. $750 million as a financing gap is no joke. And so we need to clearly assess what are the priorities that we're going to focus on in order to move this process forward, because it is not practical to think that we are going to be able to mobilize in one fell swoop $750 million and continue to be able to provide the social services that are required, maintain our education at the standard that is necessary, our health services. pay our civil servants and GAE workers. That's my intervention at this time. If I have anything else, I will come back. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for that very insightful information. We will now turn to our presenters to answer some of these questions. So perhaps I can hand over to the ECCB first, Ms. Kiran St. Omar, to respond to the first question. And anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you. And from the ECCB's end, we are certainly ready to partner with all the key ministries to help accelerate the implementation of the initiatives that we have spoken of. And just to hint of the Senior Director of Finance, Ms. Keeley, that yes, we will be approaching you quite soon in terms of a focal point for this Green Finance Pilot Initiative that we recently launched, and we'll be looking at developing those frameworks and these, that is frameworks for regulatory measurement and impact for the issuance of green bonds and other climate thematic instruments. On the issue of vulnerabilities for the ECCB, it is a very high on our agenda. We have supported collective climate action for the various heads of states on a regional level to appeal to the international, to advanced economies, more or less, to reconsider how they define vulnerability and how these are taken into account in assessing the needs for concessional finance. We definitely, and my message here today is that it is dwindling, and it's not only for small island developing states, more so for small island developing states, because the $1 billion pledge that had been made by the international community, the amount received as of 2020, I think it was 79 million. Not many of that, less than 5% was directed at seeds. So it is dwindling. I heard lots of initiatives directed at increasing concessional finance, and like was said, when the comment was being made, it was said that we are required, the small island states of the ECCU are required to co-match those concessional funds. The need for non-reimbursable grants is high in our states, especially in the aftermath of COVID, and to assist with our green and resilient recovery. However, while we continue to make this appeal, we must help ourselves. And our initiatives are directed at enabling and unlocking climate finance. We do have quite a bit of savings just sitting in the banks. And how do we mobilize these savings? We have, in terms of our capital market, limited instruments and products. So we have crafted a program under the Renewable Energy Infrastructure Investment Facility to bring about those innovative financing mechanisms that will help with the transition and bring about a wider, broader spectrum of investable products and instruments, not only for companies or the private sector deploying, but for the citizens to participate and help finance the real sector and development. So there are under discussion in terms of bond funds, green exchanges, sustainable exchanges as part of our regional stock exchange. These are long-term deliverables or outcomes we would like to see. Right now, we're putting in place the overall action plan and implementation framework, and definitely we'll be approaching quite a few of the partners here to collaborate, as all of us have been seeing, to avoid the duplication of efforts, to ensure that we deliver value and scale in the shortest period of time. But vulnerability is one of the key things. And the ECCU, we are 25 times, the probability is 25 times higher that we get hit with hurricanes and natural disasters. And the debt burden in terms of the recurring borrowings, and we're in a recurring recovery loop. We're stuck in that loop of rehabilitation and reconstruction. And while most of our islands were in train to achieving debt sustainability, quite a few, COVID has set us back. So it is very high on our agenda. Beyond those green initiatives, we are also looking at sustainable debt initiatives in assisting, as we have been doing over the past few years, in assisting member states. That would be my comments so far. I hope I did not miss any particular question. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And then lastly, we'd also like to turn again to OECS to answer the question regarding the carbon markets initiative. Shanna and Manuel, can we hand over to you?
Or good morning again, everyone. Thanks for the question. I don't know who asked it, but as it relates to the carbon markets initiatives that we are undertaking here at the OECS, so the first step for that was in February and March, we did host 2 working sessions, introductory level sessions on carbon markets for the private sector. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the discussions, they were not recorded, but the presentations are available on our website under the Climate Change Unit's webpage. Further to that, however, we are currently in discussions with 2 of our partners, GIZ and GGGI, which is the Global Green Growth Institute, on how to further that discussion and how we can look to create some sort of project that is focused on getting the private sector really involved in the carbon markets and making that a reality outside of just giving awareness to that particular topic. Also, which I forgot to say during my first presentation, we are hoping to have the second NDCFI forum in July from the 5th to the 7th here in St. Lucia. It will be in person, it will be hybrid, in person and available online. And there is going to be a special session that is going to be focused on carbon markets and how we hope the region can really start benefiting from the carbon markets overall, because we did not play a big part of it in the previous session under the CDM, but now under the Paris Agreement, we do want our region as much as possible to benefit from this new and innovative way of financing climate action. So we will be having a session focused on that at the forum in July. So I hope that answers the questions.
Thank you so much again. All right, we'll now move on to the next slide because we want to dive into the discussion and really turn to the partners that are here. So next slide, please. We will discuss briefly the partner project mapping to see if you have any remarks on that, and then we mostly want to turn to partners to hear about any new support that might be upcoming in alignment with the NDC implementation plan. There you go.
Yeah. So yes, we are now moving on to the discussion on doing some mobilization of resources in support of the NDC. Some of the questions I would like to have presented so that you could help in the discussion. How do we bridge the support gap? I know you would have heard mention of some $750 million to bridge that gap. How do we bridge it? What are the new opportunities for funding that are on the horizon? How do we engage with the private sector? Where are the entry points? Who are the ushers and the major levers? Some essential questions we must ask and get answers for. What are the needs regarding the preparation of bankable projects for private sector investment to the NDC? And how may the private sector actors support the various components of the NDC implementation? So today, a few moments ago, I would have presented on the partner mapping exercise that was done over the last couple of months. And I would like to hear from you, the partners, who have seen that presentation, whether there are some projects that you see are missing from that matrix. I'm quite open. The Ministry of Environment is very much open to receiving that information, to have it properly documented and shared for other use. I've already had requests already for that information, so that'll be good. So please, the floor is open, and those of you online, you can raise your hands as well to provide that information. You could also include that in the chat. What are the other projects that you see on the horizon or existing projects that has not been documented? You can start here in the room. Nobody sees anything. No?
Anybody online that saw anything missing from our existing project mapping? We kindly also request you to then send this information via email to Mishak. So. Yes, we can. Ivana, can you put back the mapping on the screen while we hear a question from Mr. Leighton Narain? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning. A few areas, perhaps they could be included in the existing initiatives or projects that are there, but also want to at least draw attention to them to be sure that they will be included or may be included. And that is waste management and waste reduction, which could be a part of waste management, because there are opportunities with waste to be redefined as raw materials or as a resource. And there are advantages to be had there. But this particular one is a good example to make my point on some of the earlier discussions about financing. Because while we talk about financing, we need to talk about revenue generation. And I did hear the term from one of the presenters, investment plan. So I'm wondering what that investment plan means, if it means revenue generating mechanism within the project. Because you see, many of these initiatives or projects, they seem to be very ambitious, and they're great because we need these projects in relation to the vulnerabilities that we have, and that point was already well made. So the question is, should we then prioritize and take a strategic approach to prioritizing depending on the level of funding that we have? But if we have some form of investment or revenue generating mechanism within the project, then we can achieve sustainability in them, because then we can add to the revenue stream. Because the problem is that if there isn't any revenue stream, they tend to not be sustainable after the project implementation period itself. And so that's one of the points I would like to make. I have a couple of others, but I prefer to get a response to that first.
Thank you, Mr. Narain. We will get back on that. At this moment, we're trying to map any of the projects that we're missing. So please continue to share those in the chat, because we would now like to move to any new support that may be coming. So we're looking at any new partner projects or programs that are coming in the next years, this year, any country programming, but also regional initiatives that St. Kitts and Nevis may be able to tap into with regard to the NDC implementation plan. So as you have seen today and yesterday, a lot of work has been done to prepare the priorities and the needs and have a plan for implementation of the NDC. So now we're turning to you, to the partners, to see how you are able to support this, either through the existing project, but specifically also any new support that you're hoping to provide in alignment with the NDC implementation plan. So we will first turn to the room. Yes, please, sir, go ahead. And online, you may continue to raise your hands and we will call on you shortly.
So in terms of support from the Ministry of Health, I would like to highlight the EU Carry Forum project for climate change and health. And these are projects that specifically target building climate change resilience within the health sector. And this is a regional project estimated at €7 million for 16 CARIFORUM countries, of which St. Kitts and Nevis is participating.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Morning. I think Mishak was, pretty accurate in terms of the various projects and programs that, are in play currently. He would have met with us and discussed these ongoing initiatives. Ms. Quealy is correct. Some of them fall under the Ministry of Finance and some under the Ministry of Sustainable Development. Historically, we have worked closely with the Ministry of Finance on the implementation of many of these projects. In relation to the Green Climate Fund, as you're aware, we are currently building out our country program with the Green Climate Fund, which will speak to the medium-term activities and projects that are to be implemented and funded by the GCF. Of course, that has to be integrated with the NDCs, and the consultant would have met with you to make sure that the country program for the GCF addresses the NDCs, because the GCF has been identified as probably the major financing mechanism for the NDCs. So we look forward to continue working with you on the development of the country program. It's currently under review, as I said. Some of the areas that have been pointed out relate to desalination, geothermal, wind energy, resilient water services, EE and RE, resilient land use, and low carbon resilient agriculture. Some of the areas we have pointed out to them that maybe need to be added is how would the Green Climate Fund country program also address cross-cutting issues such as education. How is it integrated into the curriculum at whether the secondary level or the tertiary level? You know, so that there's capacity building continuously. How will the country program address green jobs, for example? So these are the sort of questions that we have put to them with the assistance of my colleagues here from the NDA, Teslin and so forth. Also, we have raised with them the issue of waste management in St. Kitts and Nevis and recycling. This is an area that we have seen as underserved and underexploited in St. Kitts and Nevis, not enough attention being paid to it, something that is required under our commitments under the Sustainable Development Goals, which we are currently also seeking to monitor. And so those type of areas that are not being pursued, we need to find financing to support those. In regard to our other substantive responsibility from the Department of Economic Affairs and PSIP, in regard to the public sector investment program, so you mentioned a funding gap of 715 million. Currently, we will be launching shortly the development of a new national development plan. It's important that that plan, as the overarching strategy for the country, it's important that it be based on these commitments for the NDCs, and that is the intention, to integrate the NDC targets into the plan. Also other targets such as the Sustainable Development Goals. Following on from that plan, it's important that the PSIP then be follow from the plan to show how through the allied ministries and the different projects and programs, how the National Development Plan will be implemented. And so there needs to be not only a National Development Plan, but a PSIP strategy for the medium term that addresses how these targets for the NDCs will be addressed. As we go into the budgeting exercise, which our department is part of for the capital projects, we need to have deeper conversations with the Department of Environment in terms of how do we screen the project proposals that come from the different line ministries. The line ministries will not necessarily submit projects that are targeted towards the NDCs. They have their own priorities, sports, tourism, etc. But because climate change is a cross-cutting issue, there's an opportunity, for example, to look at the project profile and see how do we, in collaboration with environment, flag these issues and screen projects according to whether they're achieving certain targets, the NDCs or the SDGs. Currently, as you know, we use a sectoral screening tool to look at the climate resilience of projects. But at the same time, that has been an issue, and we need to go a little further in terms of how we use that data that we are collecting to inform the budget decision making. So I think we need to, aside from having the National Development Plan and the PSIP strategy, etc., we need to drill down a little further into the PSIP process and the budget process, and also how the Department of Environment as the climate focal point, how will you stimulate other ministries to include these issues in their profiles? Because they're not going to do it unless you, create the awareness and develop some systems to make sure that it's done. And so whether you want to use the Climate Change Committee or the National Sustainable Development Committee, we're willing to work with you on that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Manas, for that intervention. It was important to know the role that farmers and play in the entire process. You highlighted essentially the main factors in was in order to promote change that necessary, especially when speaking to how in-depth the process was going.
And also the identification of the necessary mechanisms, coordinating mechanisms that must be brought on stream to ensure the necessary awareness is out there, especially in the various sectors and agencies of the government. I would have liked to segue right when you're on the floor to ask about any new funding that is out there on the horizon. Not had any specific comments on that, Mr. Manas, that you can give. I know there was some discussion about the Prince of Wales and other opportunities were mentioned early in discussions. I don't know if there's any other initiative that matches the NDC outcomes. It's an opportunity for you to present on that again.
Well, under the GCF program, currently we're focusing on the readiness activities, as I said yesterday. We are about to go into a project which will target the private sector in terms of what are their barriers to accessing climate finance. And we have a climate finance expert that's currently on board that's doing other assessments nationally in terms of the barriers and the institutional barriers to both the public and private sector in terms of accessing climate finance. The representative for ECCB would have mentioned their willingness to provide support, and we would welcome support in areas such as how technical assistance in how do we, for example, structure public-private partnership arrangements. This has been something that has been discussed over the past years, but in terms of capacity, it is an issue that we have seen in terms of the ability of public servants to structure and assess the risks that are associated with those type of arrangements. So any type of technical assistance, whether through ECCB or otherwise, would be welcome. In terms of the GCF program, the readiness program, there's several activities that are ongoing now. As I said, we're working on the country program. We have a climate expert in-house that's specifically assisting the NDA in its fulfilling its role as the national designated authority for the GCF. There was mention by you, I think, about climate finance experts. So the question is, through the GCF readiness program, do we need to try to engage more such persons to assist not only the NDA, the Department of Environment, for example, the energy unit, other entities within government. And that's the purpose of the readiness program, to prepare us to get ready. And the readiness program, at some point, the GCF may ask that we stop focusing on readiness initiatives and actually focus on hard investment projects. So it's important to utilize the readiness funding while it's available now, And as said, we have reached out to the Department of Environment, and we'd like to have further discussions with you. We are seeking to have accredited 3 local entities through, for example, credit unions and so forth, to allow them to become accredited entities to the Green Climate Fund, and they would play a role in mobilizing climate finance, because they would assist in the sourcing, preparation, and implementation of these climate change projects. So that project is ongoing. Dr. Narain is aware of it. He's part of the process. And so we hope to get at least 2 institutions accredited. That's also ongoing under the GCF readiness program. So there are several initiatives that are ongoing there. I can't really exhaust all of them, but I think most importantly, the engagement with the private sector coming up, the development of the country program. We are developing some concept notes related to desalination and climate resilient agriculture. That process is ongoing. Part of that discussion involves whether there needs to be a revolving fund, and I don't want to speak about that too much because it's an early part of discussion which has to be done with the Ministry of Finance as well. But you did mention the need for domestic climate funds. And those are the kind of things, as we develop these GCF projects, that we can address under the GCF program. Yes, several activities going on at the GCF. Thelma Teslin could add if I've forgotten anything. But in terms of other initiatives, you mentioned the GEF 6 project, which is improving environmental management through sustainable development. You mentioned it already. I would perhaps invite Nikita, our project manager, to maybe give a brief synopsis of what that project is about. And most of these donor projects, most of them come with elements that identify the need for capacity building of the public servants, specifically in project writing, project development, project management, because it doesn't make sense to have an ambitious public sector investment program or an ambitious GCF country program if the ministries here don't have the ability to absorb these projects and implement these projects. I say we're not the CDB focal point, but recently we were involved with the technical assistance for the energy unit, who is here to look at what they need to improve their staff capacity, their ability to implement the national energy policy. And so that assessment was done for the energy unit, and that's something that has to be, I think, fast-tracked maybe. Well, it has to be paid attention in terms of building out the energy units on both St. Kitts and Nevis, because they're going to play a role. We have projects coming on stream. The GEF 7 project, which you mentioned, which has to do with decarbonization, the energy unit and so forth, has to play a role in those type of initiatives. Yes.
Thank you.
I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, there's so much going on. Thank you so much. We do want to give an opportunity as well for people on the line to bring in, since we have so many partners here. So everyone, please keep it short if you do want to add something. I do not see any hands raised, but I would like to call on Michael Ashorn from UNICEF, who has added something in the chat. Would you kindly share with us what UNICEF is offering?
Sure. Well, UNICEF's mandate is to work with and for the children. And I noted that in the implementation plan, there was a line saying that youth and community advisors still need to be better integrated into consideration. So UNICEF has already done some NDC work in various countries, and the latest has been in Antigua and Barbuda. We've created a youth engagement strategy and action plan based on the NDC. So we'd be happy to work with the governments in Kitts and Nevis to figure out the best way how we could actually integrate the youth as a part of this implementation process of the NDC. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Anyone else from the partners on the line that would like to add something on upcoming new support? Or anyone else in the room that hasn't spoken yet and would like to add? I see someone has raised hand. Omar Marzouk from IRENA, please go ahead.
Yes, sure, thank you. So currently at IRENA, we are also in the initial scoping phase with St. Kitts and Nevis towards a geothermal capacity building activity. And we will also aim to focus on grid stability and integration of high share of geothermal in the power mix. So the activity is mainly in the initial scoping phase. And once we have the scope proposal, we'll be sharing it with the relevant stakeholders. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much. Anybody else? All right, well, you do know that we have requested you to kindly share any upcoming support in alignment with the NDC implementation plan by the 2nd of May, which we will reiterate towards the end of the day, which is almost. But let's move on to the next slide, please, for one more discussion topic.
Private sector. So yes, well, we had the presence of the CEO of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce just a few moments ago, but he has stepped out. I thought it would be interesting to have him here to give his insight. But I am suspecting that we have other persons who are online and in the room who are representing the private sector. And so we would like to hear what your thoughts are, what your position are in terms of the involvement of the private sector in implementing the NDC, and also we can have some discussions about the potential areas of investments as well. So anybody from the private sector, please feel free to raise what questions you may have or indicate what kind of areas of support you think is applicable to your business ventures. General comment from the room as it relates to the private sector as well, in terms of the best approach in terms of engaging with the private sector. Anybody has any experience in that regard, that would be also greatly welcomed.
Anybody on the line? I do not see any raised hands there as well. I do know that we are getting to the end of our time, and we have 2 more short agenda items to close us out. So if not, I think what we're proposing is to have a follow-up discussion in a month or so. As you know, we're collecting the responses from partners, and then we have to follow up on where we are in terms of financing and role of private sector. Of course, our colleague from the Department of Economic Affairs shared about the GCF work that's ongoing, which includes also private sector components. So there's a lot of linkages, and hopefully we will have a conversation also with the Chamber of Commerce to follow up, and it was great that they were in attendance today. So I think we're going to actually close the discussion session now if there's no further comments, and move into the closing and the last agenda items. Yeah, thank you all.
That's it.
Great. I think I can just continue because I'm going to share a few small things as we are closing our meeting today about coordinating between partners. So yesterday, for those of you who were here, we heard from Ms. Narissa Williams about the intergovernmental or the inter-ministerial coordination mechanisms that are there and are proposed, like the NCCC. But what we have experienced through the NDC partnership, where, as you know, we're active in about 70, 80 countries on NDC implementation, we see a lot of countries setting up structures to coordinate more effectively also with partners. So I just want to share a few quick examples in the next few minutes and some suggestions for the way forward in St. Kitts in terms of partner coordination. Next slide, please. So this is just a bit about our work that we see that through this process that we're having here, we see that 94% of governments have increased coordination internally by having processes like these. We also saw almost 50 member countries that set up national coordination mechanisms around NDC implementation. And in 53% of the partners that are working with us are using these NDC implementation plans as a basis for coordination with each other to inform their projects, but there's still some room for improvement. And partner coordination mechanisms can really contribute to more efficiency and responsiveness of partner support, making sure we decrease duplication of different partner support, increase collaboration, and reach collective impact together. Next slide, please. And another. So just very briefly, a few examples of what countries have done. So in Kenya, for example, they set up a joint sector coordination group on climate change, which enhanced the coordination of partners in line with government priorities, supporting mainstreaming of their national climate change action plan, focus on planning and resource mobilization by prioritizing actions for partner support and catalyzing new and additional resources for climate change actions, and promoting a constructive sector dialogue among stakeholders while identifying gaps and challenges, and also work on like the monitoring and evaluation part. Next, please. Then another example is from Vietnam. They're actually in the process of setting up this development partner working group specifically on climate change. Often country may already have some sort of structure to coordinate with partners, but not on climate change specifically. So this is providing a platform to discuss common approaches to climate action in Vietnam, and also coordination and information sharing on respective development cooperation initiatives and outreach campaigns and events. And the overall objectives are to support coordination, management, capacity building, and resource mobilization for the implementation of the NDC. And meetings would take place every 2 months with partners, and some partners actually chairing these meetings so that the partners have ownership of their support coordination. And the next. One more brief example. This has a lot of information, but we will just share it after the meeting. But also Colombia have set up a specific protocol for international cooperation on climate change, which defines like a general cycle for the planning, management, execution, monitoring, and evaluation of results for 5 years, so that partners are doing this jointly, as well as a yearly cooperation management process with different phases. So partners are working together with the government through this protocol to make sure they're coordinating and providing support in alignment with the government's climate priorities. Next slide, please. And the next. So following our work here on the NDC implementation plan and this convening today, this partner roundtable, we'd like to suggest make some suggestions for the way forward on how to coordinate more effectively with partners on the NDC implementation in St. Kitts. So first of all, we of course have the NDC implementation plan currently in circulation. So we're looking at the partners that are going to be responding to this plan to continue to engage with them. Also partners that have currently or previously supported climate actions in the country. And other partners that may be interested in these topics that want to stay informed. So those are kind of the partners we're looking at involving in such a coordination structure or mechanism. What would then happen? Participate in partner roundtables like meetings like today, and coordination meetings to discuss progress on NDC implementation, but also challenges and the gaps that we continue to see in the support that is needed, and have specific contact points at each of these partner organizations that the government can quickly coordinate with, specifically the focal points that you've heard from, and also the in-country facilitator, so that there can be quick communication and coordination. So what we are suggesting after some discussions with the government is that we have meetings like these twice a year. This can happen virtually. Maybe at some point we may decide to do that in person like this, but that way we can make sure to continue the conversation and track the progress, and also align this with whatever will happen with NCCC meetings. Next slide, please. So the systems that we already have put in place through the engagement with the partnership are, again, the circulation. So if you have not received this plan, please do let us know so that we can make sure you have all the documents that you need. and can respond to the plan by the 2nd of May. This will provide a really good basis to see what are the interested partners, what is the existing and new support, and have that first set of partner information on supporting the NDC implementation plan. Then we have the online partnership plan tool, which has been presented to you, where we will be inputting all this information from partners. We will also be providing trainings to partners so that if you want to be able to navigate the tool yourself and put information in there and support directly, that should be possible. And we will decide how that goes on over time, but it will always show you the real-time latest information on where we are for the implementation. And then, very importantly, we also have quarterly progress reports. So Mishak, the facilitator for St. Kitts and Nevis, will be developing a quarterly report on what has happened on NDC implementation in that quarter, any new support that has come in, any progress on the support that's ongoing, progress on the outputs in the plan, and he will be sharing that with all of you, all of the partners, both globally and in country. And we will also be reaching out to you to get inputs for those reports so that we can make sure partner information is included. And again, this is all reflected in the online tool as well. Next slide. Which should be the last one, I hope. So kind of the main suggestions are to have a dedicated partner mechanism. Let's see, okay. A dedicated partner mechanism, so holding biannual meetings with partners, as well as having these quarterly reports. As well as updates in the online tool. Then leveraging regional and international convenings. So first of all, we will recommend that the second meeting or the meeting at the end of the year would be held around COP, so that we really can all mobilize for the next COP and have the latest information on what's happening on NDC implementation, what are the needs. So we would suggest that we do that possibly even on the sidelines of COP, so we can meet in person also with the international partner community. And then we also discussed with the Ministry of Environment that the Minister of Environment is committed to raising these issues during regional meetings, so really leveraging convenings of the CARICOM or OECS to also discuss matters with partners on NDC implementation. And then building on the existing structures, so making sure there's direct connection with the NCCC, with the SDC, and making sure that these are not disjoint initiatives, but having this partner coordination ongoing and directly feeding into what the government's already doing. And lastly, that really the emphasis of such a mechanism of partner coordination would be on like coordinated resource mobilization and support delivery based on the NDC implementation plan, because we still will need a lot of support in the coming years to be able to implement the NDC implementation plan in full through different means and resource streams. But for that, we really want to make sure that there's a close collaboration with all the partners so we can leverage resources in the most effective way. Next slide, but I think that was the last. Yes, that was the last. Thank you so much, and please do not hesitate to reach out for any more information on the NDC implementation plan and the partner circulation. And I think, Ivana, there was another slide on Cheryl and Rissa's presentation that I added, but please, Monsieur.
Thank you, Raylene. Colleagues, we are well past our closing time, so I don't plan to be long at all. We've had excellent interactions over the last 3 days, peeling back the layers of the implementation plan and discussions on all the elements of the plan. Partners, you have been asked to continue to provide us your information, and we will continue to interact with you on the next steps. Our stakeholders, we will be reaching out to you for further information and continue to find out how you can support us in this project. I want to thank our partners, the NDC Partnership Support Unit, IRENA, Climate Analytics, all our partners who joined us online over the last 2 days, all of you, our local stakeholders who have been with us over the last 2 days. It's been an excellent work, and as Raylene says, we will plan this again, I guess, in another 6 months, and be reaching back out to you with more and new information. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. Pardon? Oh, yes. And for those of us who are with us physically, we'll now go to lunch. Thank you at Calypso Restaurant. Thank you, everyone.